Hey guys, Alex Cat here, back with another build video. I know this title said coffee table, and this definitely doesn't look like a coffee table, so just have to wait and see why it is actually a coffee table. I finally have some super simple Alex Cat woodworking teachers available in the description below, so if you like what you see, definitely go pick one up. If you need any digital artwork done, then definitely check out the link in the description to the person that did all of my branding. And without further ado, let's get in this build video. The same as I did in the last power carve video, I started by gluing up a bunch of strips of walnut, a little over 48 inches by 24 inches, because that's the final dimensions I want for this coffee table. I used Type On 2 wood glue for this, and I found the best way was just using a paintbrush or even a paint roller to spread it on quickly. The next day after the glue had dried completely, I removed the clamps and then flattened the bottom using my router sled. Now that the bottom of the piece was flat, I was able to start carving, so I started by working on a design for the piece. First I drew the rectangle to scale, and then I added some markers along the side that I can replicate on the full-size scale and easily transfer over my design. This just allows me to have some reference points when I'm transferring my design to the full-size model. As you can see here, these are the same ticks as I used on my initial sketch. My main focus here was my first initial line that snaked up the whole entire piece, and then I wanted to just keep a consistent flow with those lines. After I had a bit of the design drawn out on the tabletop, I took it outside to start carving. I learned from the last time doing power carving that I'm going to probably change my design a lot during the process, so I thought this was a good time to start. The disc I'm using here is the same disc as I used in my last power carving video, which is pretty dull at this point, and I have a lot of material to move this time, and was never going to get it done with this disc. So I decided to use this chainsaw wheel to hog out most of the material. And yes, I know this chainsaw disc can be really dangerous, and there's a lot of YouTube videos showing people getting hurt using one. But I'll show you a couple tips that I found to help you make it a bit safer, and please let me know if there's anything else you see that I'm doing here that's kind of dangerous. After carving for a while, I took my time to draw out some new lines, and then carve, repeating these steps until I had the entire piece roughly carved out. As you can see, the safest way I found to use this chainsaw bit was just tapping on the wood to chip out little pieces at a time instead of taking a huge chunk out and risking it grabbing and pulling the tool away. I also made sure that the tool is rotating so that if it does grab, it pulls away from me instead of towards me. This results in having all the chips fly at me, and that's why I'm wearing a glove on my left hand, but I think this is well worth it knowing that the tool won't come towards me if it does catch. After I had all the valleys roughed out, I went back over the entire piece, smoothing out all the peaks because all the pieces of the wood were a little bit different thickness. To help smooth out all the marks left by the chainsaw bit, I went back to this power carving disc and went over everything again. After I sanded out all the lines left by the router on the bottom of the table, I flipped it over and started sanding the top. I found the best way to do this was just using this flap wheel and then hand sanding at the very end. All the sanding helped reveal a bunch of cracks that were left in the tabletop, which I filled with a mixture of sawdust and wood glue. In order to cut the tabletop to its final dimensions, I laid out this piece of tempered glass that I bought for the top, and then marked it and cut it using my track saw. I was a little worried about how strong the piece was going to be now that I had carved it down quite thin in some areas, so I added these braces on the bottom that will also give me a place to mount the legs. So that the threaded inserts didn't come through the top, I marked peaks on the top where they could go into, and then flipped the piece over and made these same marks on the bottom, drilling holes for the threaded inserts. Off camera I turned the holes into slots on the cross members so that the tabletop can contract and expand freely. Next I marked all the locations for the pegs that will support the glass above the wood sculpture. Luckily I was able to put a scrap piece of wood in this vise right beside my drill press and then balance the tabletop on this to make all the holes in the top. I used a nice and sharp 1-inch Forstner bit and just went really slow to get nice clean holes. Now that the filler and all the cracks is nice and dry, I used a 180 grit flap wheel on my drill again to sand the entire thing, and then added a chamfer to the bottom of the tabletop and to all 3 supports. Now that I had everything sanded up to 220 grit, I prepped for finish by wiping off all the excess dust with this blue shop towel. I really wanted some shine to this project so that you could really see the troughs and valleys, so I ended up ordering some tried and true original wood finish. But after seeing a video by Blacktail Studios on how to get a bunch of shine out of Osmos 3043, which I normally use for all my projects, I ended up just going with it because I love the look of it on walnut and I'm really familiar with it. I buffed and finished on the bottom of the table and let it sit for a little while before wiping off the blue shop towel so that I can flip it over and finish the top right away. On the top I used a lot of finish, buffing in really hard so I could saturate the top completely. And then after about 15 minutes of letting it soak in, I used the blue shop towel to wipe off the excess. One thing to note, the first coat's not going to look the best because you're just trying to saturate the top and get ready for the next coat. The next day after the finish was nice and dry, I tapped in a couple of pegs to figure out how long I needed them to hold the glass just above the sculpture. I also made sure to account for the amount the pegs go into the supports below. Now that the table had finished on it, it was really easy to see where I had excess glue that I forgot to sand before, so I just went back and sanded these areas and made sure to really focus on them when I was finishing on the second coat. I also made sure to lightly sand the entire tabletop nice and evenly with 320 grit sandpaper before applying the second coat. I followed the exact same steps as my first coat, just buffing it in really hard and letting it sit before wiping it off with a blue shop towel. And as you can see, that shine is already starting to step up now and looking a lot more even. The next day I got ready to put on the third and final coat, sanding with 600 grit lightly and evenly across the entire surface. I applied the finish using a 3M white pad as always, but this time I used as little finish as I could, just trying to get the entire surface. After I really buffed all that finish in, I came back with a clean white pad and then buffed it in again, trying to remove any excess that was on the top. The final trick of this finish was to wait about 45 minutes and then use a clean blue shop towel to just buff the entire surface again. This will just help remove any streaks in the finish and make sure it's nice and even, as you can see in this final shot. If you'd like to add even more shine to the tabletop than I did here, then I'd just keep adding coats the same way I did this third one until you have as much shine as you want. I ended up going with brass metal legs for the tabletop, so I wanted the pegs to match, so I ended up spray painting them gold. I really wasn't happy with how this ended up looking, so I finally found on eBay some solid brass rounds that I will use to replace these. These will take a couple weeks to come in, so if you'd like to see the table with those installed, then go follow me on Instagram or Facebook as I'll post updates there. The final step of this process was to screw the legs onto the bottom and then throw a piece of glass on top, and we were done. I'd be super curious to hear what you think of the carved top and the whole entire tabletop in general in the comments below. I think I really started to get the hang of the power carving in this one and can't wait to do some more power carving in the future. Thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you back again for my next video very soon. Make sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I hope you enjoy all the angles of this beautiful coffee table.